You know, one of the things that's very interesting about human beings is that we're kind of wired to be skeptics. And it really doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be climate change. I mean, just look at Trump, right? Who's in denial, to religion and science. But when it comes to computers, here's what some of the people said about, let's say, 50 years ago. Someone said, I think that there's going to be a world market for maybe 5 computers. You know who said that? That was Thomson Watson, the chairman and CEO of IBM in 1943. Another comment was, computers in the future will weigh no more than 1.5 tons. That was Popular Mechanics, 1949. So it's very easy to laugh at some of these comments. But back then, they meant it and they were very serious about it. Unfortunately, we managed to get down to not 1.5 tons, but 1 millimeter cube that can sit on the edge of a coin. And what you're looking at it is the M-Cube, which is one of the smallest fully functioning autonomous computers in the world. Now, part of the reason the University of Michigan created this device is specifically for the Internet of Things, so that everything, whether it's the doorknobs or chairs, to even things inside your body can actually start to measure and provide sensory data. Now, I bet you some of you are probably thinking, quantum computing, isn't that more academic? And you're skeptical, and you should be, because I am. What you're looking at is the first so-called quantum computer called D-Wave. And this D-Wave is commercialized, it's actually currently in operation. But the question is this really a quantum computer? Well, I think many people will actually argue that it is not a real computer, quantum computer. Matter of fact, there is a scientist by the name of Daniel Lidar, who's at the USC, who ran several tests. And one of the tests was to run several thousand iterations in terms of against this machine and to chart the results. And what he found out was instead of this typical normal distribution bell curve, it was actually upside down, which meant that it either entirely failed or entirely succeeded. Okay, well that's different. I mean, clearly there's a reasonable evidence that there could be some quantum behavior. Well, there was another test, and this was around the speed of computation. So they actually compared the D-Wave computation power against that of a traditional Intel desktop machine. And unfortunately, it didn't have any evidence of quantum speed up. So you're probably thinking, quantum computing, this is purely theoretical. It's all in the quantum physics realm, and we're never going to see it in our lifetime, right? Well, last week, I was on TV because China had just announced the fact that they had broken the record, where previously Google, NASA, and University of Santa Barbara had achieved 9 qubits, entangled qubits. The Chinese recently were able to achieve 10 photonic quantum qubits. More importantly, there is actually an initiative, and this was published as well, where there is a blueprint that's been made for a large-scale quantum computer. And what this does, this was published in Sciences Advances, is it's a blueprint for a microwave-trapped ion quantum computer that's going to enable a large-scale quantum computer. Now, it takes a very modular approach that makes it possible to create that scalable quantum computer architecture. That's using a long wavelength radiation quantum gates. And all the modules that control this can be operated on a standalone basis. Now let me come back to IoT. Why am I talking about quantum computers? Well, I'm a thought leader, global thought leader in the field of fourth industrial revolution and the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is currently plagued with some major issues such as cybersecurity, interoperability, standards, and protocols. So how is quantum computing potentially going to solve some of these problems that's hampering adoption? Well, to answer this question properly, we need to take a look at some of the framework things. So according to the World Economic Forum, some of the obstacles that we're experiencing in terms of adopting the Internet of Things on a large scale is, number one, security. Probably the biggest issue. Because if you thought that security was bad with mobile and desktop, now all of a sudden cameras, chairs, desks, paint, carpet, and clothes are going to be all potential vulnerable weakness in the link. Privacy. When I was speaking at the Personal, which was built by the Siemens company, they had a demonstration, which was a camera in the bathroom which took a picture of you using the bathroom. Now, of course, for GDPR and for privacy reasons, what they had to do was they had to not take those persistent photos and share it to the cloud, but rather convert the image and put it to numeric value that they wanted to the cloud. So privacy becomes a real issue when all of a sudden, not only can the intelligence community or hackers hack into everything that you have in the environment as well, and know exactly what you're doing, what you've done, with whom, and where, and when. Other issues around interoperability. So if you've ever done home automation, smart things at home, you try to buy, let's say, a camera, or let's say you have a thermostat and so forth. Well, the gateway is going to only support certain types of standards and protocols. So if you want to really deck out your home automation, you may have to buy multiple gateways that have different support for standards and protocols. That's real problematic. So, how do we start to address some of these big issues that's challenging the Internet of Things? Well, before I can actually talk about quantum computers, I actually have to give a very brief primer on quantum mechanics, so bear with me as we go through this. So quantum mechanics, for some of you, and probably some of you may be actually more familiar than I am, is a branch within physics that is the fundamental theory around the nature at very small scale, or nanoscale, subatomic particle level. Whereas the classical physics deals at the macroscopic or very larger types of scale level. But the quantum mechanics differs in that it's able to understand the energy and momentum and other qualities that are often restricted to discrete values at very small levels, including characteristics around both the particle as a wave, which we call the wave and dual wave-particle duality, as well as the ability to actually handle the precision, which we call the uncertainty principles. In terms of quantum mechanics, it was originally developed to help explain and to describe an atom. So some of you have heard of the atomic bomb as an example, or nuclear fusion. Well, it is looking at the spectra of light that's emitted by different isotopes of the same chemical elements, as well as the subatomic particles. And this field incorporates four important phenomena, or classic phenomena we call the quantization of certain physical properties, the quantum entanglement, principle of uncertainty, and then finally the wave-particle duality. Now, raise your hand if I've already lost you. And you have no idea what I'm talking about and why you're sitting here. That's okay. But let me go into a little bit deeper. So let's talk about quantum superposition. This is probably one of the most important concepts in terms of understanding quantum physics. It basically means that superposition allows for multiple states. It means that it can be up and down all at the same time, which is exactly what my wife would prefer that I'm able to do. Just take out the garbage, do my laundry, and actually take care of the kids all at the same time. I'm not very good at doing all of those all at the same time. Whereas in the traditional bits model, it's binary, meaning that it's this or that. Whereas again, in the qubit or quantum fashion, it's able to do both 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, and so forth. And one of the things that's very interesting is that traditional type of a classical model tends to be very serial. You send something, you get something back, you send something, you get something back and forth. This, you actually send all of it, all at the same time, and then you get an immediate response back. And this becomes very important whether we're talking about cancer research, or we're talking about optimization of AI, or even smart cities, as an example. Entanglement. Quantum entanglement is a very interesting phenomenon where you have a group of particles that interact in such a way in this quantum state where each particle cannot be described independently of the others. And they have to be basically handled in an entire system fashion. But one of the things that makes it very interesting is that, again, this slide's a little bit busy, is that it's able to handle various types of interactions. And that entanglement, that kind of the stickiness, so to speak, is broken when an entangled particle decoheres, meaning it starts to kind of break down through interaction with the environment. For example, when a measurement is made, which will become important for cybersecurity purposes. One of the things that's really interesting about this entanglement is this notion of speed. So when we make a measurement of a particular entangled particle, it is less than 1/100th of 1% of travel time of speed of light, which means it's almost like instantaneous. It's incredibly fast. So if you're concerned about latency, like 5G and autonomous cars, and how are we going to actually handle some of these latency issues in the fourth industrial revolution, quantum computing can actually be able to support instantaneous, almost near light speed types of communication. I presented this in Vienna a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned quantum teleportation, and somebody got up and was really super excited. They thought, finally we can teleport from here to there. Not exactly. Quantum teleportation is not a physical teleportation of you going from one place to another, but rather it's talking about a process where the quantum information, such as exact states of an atom or a photon, can be transmitted from one location to another location with the help of the classical communication channel. Okay? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this in the next slide, which will make a little bit more sense, hopefully. Is when we're sharing this information about the qubit from one location to another, without actually physically having to transport that underlying particle that qubit is normally attached to, is able to actually share that information almost instantaneously at high speed. And it's not limited to space. In other words, if you were out in space or on another planet, let's say, you could actually communicate something to me because of that entanglement, and I will actually receive it in almost a little bit less than the speed of light. So here's an example just to give you a little bit better illustration. On the left, on the bottom, you have Alice. And if Alice's particle is entangled with the particle owned by Bob, who is on the other side, right? Let's say that Bob teleports something to Charlie in this case, and then they become entangled. Well, Charlie in turn, of course, is entangled with Alice. But the fact that they went through this entanglement with each other, all of a sudden you have Bob that is actually entangled with Alice. But yet they never directly communicated with one another. And one of the exciting areas of quantum mechanics is the cryptography, which has to do with security pieces, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Let me just give you one of the fundamentals. If you remember this notion of entanglement, one of the things that I mentioned just real briefly is that if you actually make an observation or measurement of something, it actually decoheres. And that you can actually witness those measurements. Just the fact that somebody who's watching will actually change the result. And this is incredibly important from a quantum cryptography purposes because it allows the sender and the receiver to be able to actually easily detect the presence of an interceptor. And this will make a lot more sense when I give you the example of the satellite the Chinese are testing. The best example of quantum cryptography is the use of quantum key distribution, which offers this information theoretically secure solution to handle key exchange problems. Now, this process of using quantum communication to establish a shared key between two parties without a third party learning anything about that key is very important because, again, as soon as you have a third party that is dropped, all of a sudden it changes the nature and the result. And therefore, both parties will know that something has happened. Now, in today's world, what does this mean? Well, many of us, perhaps as consumers or maybe as programmers, understand public key encryption and signature scales. Well, using quantum mechanics, we can actually offer another alternative that can actually break just about all the current cryptographic algorithms that exist today. Because it's able to use the Shor's algorithm for factoring the discrete logs that frankly classical traditional computers can't do.
On the cloud side, we have IoT provides a tool.
Alright, so let's get into the quantum piece. So I mentioned a little bit about bits and qubits a little bit, but you can see that instead of the usual bit model, 0 and 1, qubit with the quantum computer allows for you to be able to be in any state in the sphere. And that means that you can actually pack a lot of information and send it all at the same time versus having serial method that's necessary with traditional programming. Now, quantum computers transitioning to actual computing systems for using some of these mechanics for operation of the data is able to solve certain problems faster than the traditional counterparts, such as using, like I said, using Shor's algorithm for simulation of quantum many-body systems, or the existence of quantum algorithms using the Sanders algorithm that can run faster than any possible traditional probabilistic classical algorithms. A quantum computers is going to be able to more efficiently solve problems that frankly is just too cumbersome, even at the cloud level, for us to handle. So imagine if you were working in pharmaceutical and trying to figure out all the different formulas, the elements, and the characteristics, and you want to be able to figure out which combination, permutation is going to be able to actually solve this disease. For you to actually run and crunch all that, it's going to be very difficult. Similarly, for specific sets of cancer, and you want to get down to a gene within that DNA and figure out exactly what's happening, you need super major computation, and quantum computer can provide those types of speed-ups. Now, the biggest challenge with making quantum computers feasible has this issue around decoherence. And decoherence is very much the Achilles heel of quantum computing. And it's about handling this error correction. Just like noise signal processing, you have to figure out ways to stave off this decoherence, which basically comes from interaction with the environment, as well as some of the other processes. This could be like quantum gates, lattice vibrations, background thermonuclear spins of physical systems. All of these things cause decoherence. And unfortunately, once it starts happening, then you start to lose that entanglement, which is so important for the properties that we're talking about. All right, so let's come back to the Internet of Things. So how is quantum computing going to actually solve some of these difficult problems in terms of cybersecurity, Internet of Things, and the fourth industrial revolution? Let's talk about integer factorization as an example, which is critical for the security of public key cryptographic systems. Well, with quantum, it's able to handle things that traditional computers can't do. And this again goes back to what I was telling you about the quantum key distribution, where you can actually be able to solve very quickly the product of prime numbers. Let's say the product of two 300-digit primes as an example. As well as be able to efficiently solve using the Shor's algorithm to be able to find distractors. Whereas traditional computers would take eons, or may never be able to actually break it at all. So this ability allows for quantum computers to be able to encrypt, as well as to decrypt cryptographic systems very efficiently in a way that traditional computers cannot hack. It's literally hack-proof. And more importantly, other quantum computers cannot actually break the cryptographic algorithms because of this. Because of some of the concepts that I share with you, such as the fact that as soon as you have a third party observing, the results are going to change. So the best known example, like I was mentioning, is around quantum key distribution, which offers an information theoretically secure solution for some of the key distribution that I mentioned before. So that means that using the Shor's algorithm, we can actually break today's RSA, the disablement, and some of the other algorithms that are currently used. Now, why is this important? Because today's war is not a military war anymore. The US, Europe, as well as the Middle East are being constantly bombarded with cyber attacks and ransomware. And we're directly working with the US DARPA, the Department of Defense, Homeland Securities, and other major military organizations because cybersecurity has become so important to be able to lock down critical infrastructure. The other piece that's very exciting is the computational speed, the quantum speed up. The fact that you can actually have multiple information sets and you get a result almost instantaneously, almost near light speed, is incredibly important from a speed and power. Because that also can actually solve very difficult, complex optimization problems. So if you think about, let's say, enterprise level, a building like this, optimization of the lights, the internet platform for just light, the HVAC system, the audio system, the security system. Well, when you have layers and layers of systems, how do you start to optimize? And let's take it at a bigger scale, like Rome as an example. Weather, traffic, detours, tourism, seasonality, all of these things. How do you start to optimize for that constant change? Well, quantum computation will be able to actually handle all that real time, instantaneously, because you will literally send all the input values out and get the result back instantaneously. This is what we call polynomial speed up. One of the best known examples of this is quantum database search. Let's talk about interoperability. Like I said before, and I gave you the example of home automation, but that also gets compounded when we talk about smart cities because all of a sudden that's on Zigbee, that's on Z-Wave, that's on Bluetooth, that's on narrowband IoT and so forth. How do you start to actually coalesce against all this fragmentation of standard protocols? Well, with the quantum computer, we're not restricted to radio frequency wavelength communications anymore. That means that the data rate, the rate of fragmentation, the standards that plague us today is going to be irrelevant. Same with network latency. So if you've ever tried to consume video in a certain environment where the speed is slow, well, with quantum computer, you can transmit from one location to another, regardless of what that distance is, instantaneously. It means that we will not have any type of network choking points or latency whatsoever. I spoke at the largest cloud expo in London called Cloud Expo Europe a few months back, and a lot of the focus was on the cloud computation. But what they don't realize is that the future is going to be very much edge-based, meaning that the microchips like the NQ that I mentioned before, it's going to get so powerful that it can actually reside on a water bottle or on a chair or on your shoes. And moreover, these will actually create a wireless sensor network, a mesh network, that can actually create a super grid computer. Well, imagine, it's hard for us to see that D wave that we're being right? But eventually, we're going to start to see that enterprise in a very small fashion that can handle quantum computation at nanoscale. Okay, that means that everything that's out there is going to be actually handled that, including the ability to run very complex AI and machine learning capabilities. The other piece is storage, and I running out of time, but there is a research that came out that talked about storing more data at the atom level. So if you think about this type of storage device, with quantum bits, you're currently able to get to 1,000 times more compression of data into that type of format. Okay, so let's talk about some of the latest developments, and I'll be fairly quick about it. Probably the one that's the most relevant and newest, again, is the Chinese development, both from a satellite that's handled with teleportation and quantum key distribution. But the other one, like I said, is a research team has been able to prove out again photonic quantum entanglement. And they're shooting to, by end of this year, reach 20, which is significant given the fact that the benchmark was 9. And in 10 years, they hope to reach about 100 quantum qubits. Now, what does quantum qubits get you? It gives you about 1 million times the computational power of all the computers that exist today. So that's coming in about 10 years. Unfortunately, I can't go into all the details about the time crystals, the single atom magnetic storage, just because we're out of time. But what I can tell you is that quantum computer has the potential to supercharge computation, certain types of computation, to be able to actually provide instantaneous communication. So if you think about the implications of cognitive ability, as well as to break some of the hardness existing cryptographic algorithms today and provide hack-proof security. It has the ability to supercharge, enable Internet of Things more broadly than force this revolution with confidence. And if you think it's 20 years out, 30 years out, it's not. It's already happening, and we're looking to have large-scale quantum computing. Even when we take the next several years, about 10 years. So with that said, I hope that, again, I'm not trying to promise the world, but rather explore possibility. And as you're thinking about whether it's your startup or your corporate bodies, think about the innovation that you can think about, because the incremental innovations and investments that you're making may become completely obsolete. So with that, I'll take questions.
Okay, you know, what I'm thinking, after this talk from you, about Star Trek beat the Amyx copy from the late that comes in my mind. Very interesting, very, I love quantum mechanics. You heard that recently in a lab in Australia, they experimented that in quantum mechanics, a particle can change in a waveform accordingly to what's happened next. So the future is driving the status of the particle instead of the past. So it's not just a matter of being in more places at the same time, but also moving and changing form accordingly to what's happened next of the past. So it's quite challenging, and there are a lot of potential things behind this kind of. But my question is, how do you think cybersecurity will change when
So the question is, how is cybersecurity going to change in QC? I'll give you a very tangible demonstration or example. Most of us think that the U.S. government has a very robust cybersecurity system in place to protect their grid, to protect their infrastructure. But the reality is it's not. The reality is that they're in a very desperate situation at this point because they pretty much have to hack every system, whether it's at a base level or at a military level, has to protect it. It's vulnerable. And most of the solutions that we see in the marketplace are very much concerned about the perimeter, surrounding firewalling. But when in fact, the real danger is actually the agents and the people that are already inside. So you have to assume that the malicious intent exists inside already, is inside the perimeter. So just checking for network and network anomalies is insufficient or trying to harden the firewall. That's one. But one of the biggest vulnerabilities they identified is that if you think about, let's say, military branches, they have buildings, they have tanks, they have people, they have housing. Well, everything on the edge, think about these speakers, these cameras, are vulnerable. They are connected to the LAN, the area network, and they have absolutely no physical or cyber security measures whatsoever. It only takes hacking to one of these kind of legacy antiquated systems to then access the LAN and into a broader network. So it's highly vulnerable. Where quantum computing comes in, and this is something that China is actually much more advanced, both from hacking but also experimentation. The fact that they spent $100 million to send a satellite to test out quantum key distribution, which means they may be able to spy on us, but we can't spy on them because we can't break their cryptographic algorithms because of the technology that we use.
Well, that's very interesting. Something that we need to keep following and going deep and deeper to learn about those technologies. Thank you.
So I have one comment, which is for startups that are thinking about what's the next frontier, kind of like what he was saying, don't look at the past. It's same thing with the stock market. The past is not an indicator of the future. And if you're thinking about the past or the current competition and trying to innovate around that, you're going to miss out because yesterday I spoke with some of you, but I also gave a talk yesterday as well, which is what's coming down the pipeline is things that you haven't even imagined. AGI, which is singularity, neurally networked, meaning that our brains will be chip-enabled with augmentation of AI and internet-enabled, fully immersive VR, AR, not in the gaming sense that you're thinking about, but in a multi-universe, multiverse, multi-dimensions that will be living all in the same period. We can weave in and out of different life realities. There are things that's coming down, not 20 years, but the next few years. I met with the CEO of Kernel, who is working on essentially the equivalent of Neuralink, like Lockups. And when we had that dialogue with the other intellectual leaders in the world, I can tell you that the world is going to change ways of thinking radically. Fortunately, policymakers, governments, corporate bodies, and even startups are completely unaware.
True, very true, very true. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, thank you. What? Next.